Hello friends, my name is Mohammad Yunus and welcome to a new video in our economics series. We have already completed 2 videos and both those videos are extremely important to understand the concept that we are going to study today as well as in future videos. If you haven't watched them already, then please do go and watch them. The link for the videos has been provided in the description. In today's video, we are going to study some concepts which are foundational in order to understand various macroeconomic concepts as well as indicators that we study in economics as well as in newspapers. Before watching this video, please read Introduction to Macroeconomics once. After that, watch this video. It will help you make your concepts clearer as well as help you remember the things for longer period of time. So without further ado, let's start with our today's topic. In the first part of this video, we have already discussed the concept of circular flow of income, right? Or it is also called a circular flow of money, right? So in that we studied that money moves from 2 important sectors in economy, that is household sectors to firms and then from firms to household sectors, right? So we had taken this model of circular flow of income in order to simplify and understand the movement of money in economy, right? And we also discussed that GDP is calculated on this very concept of circular flow of income, and we discussed that there are 3 methods of calculating GDP. And after that, we also discussed some components which bring money into this circular flow of income and the components which take money out of this circular flow of income. In today's video, we are going to see some more detail about these components and try to understand what is the significance and impact of each of these components on the total economy of the country. We are going to move away from the simple model of village that we studied and then understand the implication of each of these components on the macroeconomic indicators of the country. So that is why this video is going to be very important, right? So let us start with that. So as we saw in the previous section, there are 3 components which bring money into the circular flow of income, right? One is government expenditure, second is investment expenditure, third is exports. Now, what we discussed in that simple village economy was a 2-factor economy. There we had only 2 components. One was household, second was firm. But if you go into the real world contains many other factors. So real economy is complex. Now let us understand those complexities and try to connect each factor with the other. Now let us bring one important factor into our 2-factor economy. Previously we saw only 2-factor economy. Now let us bring government into that. We have already seen this. I'm just giving you a graphic representation of that. Now we saw that households purchase goods and services from firms and firms give wages, dividends, interest, profit, rent. What are these? These are factor payments, right? And these payments are utilized by households for purchasing goods and services produced by firms. So this much we have already seen. Now let us understand the impact of government. What government does? First of all, government imposes taxes. Government imposes taxes on both households as well as firms. For example, if your income is more than 5 lakh rupees, then you come under tax bracket. You have to pay 10% income tax. And if you are a manufacturing unit, you are producing some good or service, then you have to pay corporate tax, right? So both households and firms pay taxes to government. So households pay tax to government, firms pay tax to government. So what is this to government? These taxes are income to government. They are receipts, right? So government gets money by imposing tax on households and firms. So when government is imposing tax on households, what is happening here? Government is taking a part of income of the households, and both of these constitute receipts of the government, right? So they are actually called as revenue receipts, but we will see about that in future videos. Okay. So these are receipts. Now what is happening because of these taxes? Money is being taken away from both households and firms, right? So we can say that taxes decrease money supply. I want you to pay keen attention to this because UPSC has asked questions on this multiple times, and other competitive exams also there are questions on these topics. Like for example, in inflation, you can see that whenever there is inflation, government increases the tax rate or RBI increases the repo rate, right? So what are they doing by increasing the tax rate? They are taking more money from the people, right? They are taking money out of households and they are taking money from firms. this decreases demand. About demand, we will see in the next section of this video. Now let us come to expenditure side of government. So this is income side of the government. Now what expenditure government is taking up? This is a very simple version because government takes expenditures in different sectors as well as government gets money from different sources, right? Now, first is social transfers. We have already seen in previous video what are transfer payments, right? Social transfers, like for example, government is giving old age pensions, government is transferring money to widows, government is giving money to build houses, government is giving subsidy on various goods and services, like for example in ration, government is giving subsidy. So all these constitute social transfers, meaning money is being transferred from government to households. These are one-way transfers, meaning simply money is being transferred to households. Government is not expecting anything in return for this money from households, right? That is why these are called one-way transfers. Now, if they are transferring this money into the hands of households, what is happening here? These social transfers are increasing overall money supply in economy, right? So hence, social transfers increase money supply. Now, there is another type of expenditure that government is undertaking. Here you see government purchases. Now, you must be wondering why government purchases something from firms and what government purchases. So, you should know government is also an organ of the country. It needs to run different types of services. For example, it has different offices, it has different departments, different ministries. So, they need goods and services. So those goods and services are purchased by government from firms because firms produce goods and services, right? Second, government also undertakes infrastructure investment. Government builds roads, highways, bridges, ports, airports. For all that, government needs different raw materials, right? So all those things are also purchased by the government. So when government is purchasing them, what is happening? Money is moving from government into this circular flow. So government purchases increases money supply. Now please understand these three things very carefully because these are going to be helpful in our next section of this video when we understand aggregate demand. So in the previous section we have already seen this much, right? Now this is the fourth important component in money supply. One is household, second is firm, third is government, fourth is rest of the world, right? We export items to the rest of the world. We also import items from the rest of the world. What happens to overall supply of money because of these two factors? We have already seen this in our previous video, right? When we export items from India to some other country, we get paid for those exports. That money which is paid is entering into our money supply and increasing our money supply. See, you might ask this question, instead of exporting, if we sell these goods to our own households, then also money is being injected. Yes, but that money is being taken from households and then getting injected. So there is no extra money coming into the circular flow of income, right? Same money is again being injected. So one, it is getting deducted on the one side and on the other side it is getting injected. But when we export items to some other country, let's say we export it to Middle East. So what happens now? We get money from there. So that money is extra money which was not part of our money supply. So hence exports bring new money into the economy and increase money supply. Now what about imports? It's very easy to understand, right? It is opposite of export. When we import, what are we doing? We are purchasing goods and services manufactured in other countries, and for purchasing those goods, we are giving money which was part of our own money supply. Money is moving out of the country and goods are moving inside the country. So you can say that imports decrease total money supply in economy, right? So this is the fourth important actor. Now it's very easy to say, just by looking at the terms you can easily say whether that increases money supply in economy or not. Exports, obviously it is bringing new money, increases money supply. Imports, decreases money supply. Taxes, money is being taken away by the government, decreases money supply. Government purchases, increases money supply. Taxes again, decrease money supply. Social transfers, increase money supply, right? So you have to know each and every component and what it does to the overall money supply in economy. So then your foundational aspect will be perfect and you will be able to solve complex questions which will be asked in UPSC and other competitive exams. One of the important terms which is at the core of modern industrial capitalist economic system is demand. Without demand, our whole economic system collapses, right? you must have seen during COVID that government was talking about increasing the demand in order to revive the economy. Now, we will understand this concept in detail in the next section of this video. Now, what is demand? Demand, to explain it in simple way, it is the ability of consumers to purchase goods at a particular price at a particular time. Now, I said that demand is at the core of economy. Demand is like the cornerstone of economy. Without demand, the whole edifice of our modern industrial capitalist economic system falls down. To understand the importance of demand, we will take the situation which was there during COVID. So what happened because of COVID? There was widespread loss of jobs. So when people lose job, what happens? They lose money, they lose income. So their income comes down, right? So when income comes down, tell me what happens to the purchasing power. What is purchasing power? It is the ability to purchase something. And purchasing power is directly proportional to the income. If I have money, then I have ability to purchase. If I don't have money, then I can't purchase, right? So when income declines, it means the purchasing power declines. So now tell me what happens to demand when purchasing power declines. Now because of loss of job, my purchasing power has declined. So I will start consuming less, purchasing less, right? So not only me, thousands of people are doing the same because they have no money to spend, right? So now what happens to demand? Obviously demand will decline. So now what will be the impact of this demand which has fallen down because of decrease in purchasing power of the consumers on firms or companies which are producing goods and services? See, they have certain productive capacity, meaning they have certain amount of machinery which they are using to produce certain amount of goods, and they need certain number of people to produce those goods and services which are in demand, right? Now what is happening? Demand is falling, right? When demand is falling, companies, what they will do? They will start producing less number of goods and services. Why? Because there is no demand. So what is the impact of decreasing demand? First impact is production of goods and services decreases. This is the first impact of decrease in demand on firms. So when production of goods and services decreases, tell me, do they need the same amount of people who are working in the factory as before? No, they will decrease the number of people working in the factories. Firms will have to ask some people to go home. This is the second impact of decreasing demand, that unemployment increases. When unemployment increases, what happens to purchasing power? You see, there is a positive feedback cycle here. When unemployment increases, what happens? Their incomes decline and again their purchasing power declines. Demand falls. This again pushes companies to produce less goods, employ less people, leading to unemployment. See, one issue led to the fall in demand, and demand, which is the most important part of our economy, declined. Because of this declining demand, these important events are happening. What is the meaning of production of goods and services is declining? GDP is declining. And when GDP becomes negative for 2 consecutive quarters, one quarter is of 3 months, right? GDP is calculated quarterly, right? So that is called as recession. Now, when recession deepens, when recession is continued for a long period of time, it leads to depression. If you have read world history or economic history, then you must remember the Great Depression of 1930, which is cited as one of the reasons for Second World War. Now, can you see the importance of demand, which I have placed at the center of our economic system? Because of fall in demand, every structure of economy is falling. And it not only has economic impact, it also has geopolitical impacts. So now you know that the demand is extremely important. Demand must be there in economy in order for economy to function. In the next section of this video, we will see those important factors of economy that we have already seen and how those factors of economy impact demand. So in the previous section, we saw what is demand and how much important demand is for economic structure to stand and sustain. Right? Now we will understand one important term which is often used in economics is aggregate demand. You will see this in newspapers and news debates as well, that aggregate demand is at the crux of economy. Whenever economy is down, for example, during COVID-19, government undertook various measures under its Atmanirbhar Bharat package, right? So what was the main reason for Atmanirbhar Bharat package? To increase the aggregate demand. And we already saw how much important aggregate demand is. In previous sections, we have already seen there are four main actors in economy, right? And those actors are government, households, firms, and foreign sector, that is exports and imports. Each sector of economy has an important role to play in increasing or decreasing the aggregate demand. The aggregate demand is the combination of expenditures undertaken by these four factors or components of economy. You see, this is the formula of aggregate demand and it contains four factors. One is the expenditure, that is consumption expenditure undertaken by the households. Second is the investment expenditure undertaken by the firms. Third is the expenditure undertaken by the government. And fourth component is net exports. We will understand the impact of each actors in the next section. So let us understand what is the role played by households in affecting the aggregate demand in economy. Okay, so households undertake basically two functions. One is consumption, second is savings. Now I will repeat again, whatever we are studying in today's video, this is just an introduction to these concepts. Each of these concepts will be studied in detail in future videos as and when we progress. So these are the two important functions undertaken by households. Now let us understand what is the impact of consumption on demand or economy. Now as we saw, it is the consumption which leads to demand in economy. When you consume, you spend money, you increase the demand. And when demand increases, factories start producing more goods because there is a demand for goods in the market. When factories increase production, then they have to employ more people, right? To produce more, you need more people or more factors of production. For example, let's say a factory is there in your town which was producing goods and services. Now, as population of that town increases, demand for goods increases. So now factory has to produce more goods. In order to produce more goods, it has to increase the use of factors of production. And one of the most important factors of production is labor, meaning people must be employed to produce more goods. So whenever there is more production, employment increases. So you see, whenever there is more employment, what happens? Again, more employment leads to more consumption. Why more employment leads to more consumption? Because when more people work, they get money. And when they get money, they spend money. So employment increases consumption and consumption again increases demand in economy. Now this concept that we are studying will also be very helpful when you will study inflation. Now second important thing which is undertaken by households is savings. Now tell me whether savings is good or bad for economy. In the very first video, we talked about an important concept in economy which I called as the backbone of economy, that is capital formation or gross or net investment in economy, right? So capital formation is extremely important for the well-being of economy or progress of economy. For a country which is developing to become developed, it needs more and more capital formation. Why? If you want to know, then please watch my first video, that is types of goods and services. The link is provided in the description. Now, wonder why savings is important for capital formation? Just think about it. Capital formation requires money. If you want to invest in machinery, land, vehicle for transportation of goods and services, roads, bridges, you need money to invest, right? So you need to undertake investment expenditure. Now in economy, who undertakes investment expenditure? Two important factors undertake investment expenditure. One is firms. If you have a factory, then you have to have machinery, vehicles, land and other such things, which is called investment expenditure. So firms undertake investment expenditure. Second, we have already discussed in previous videos, government also undertakes a lot of investment expenditure in the form of capital expenditure. Government builds bridges, roads, highways, factories, ports and all, right? So government undertakes investment expenditure. Now tell me, where do governments and firms get money to invest for capital formation? Firms, how do they get money for investing? They go for taking loans, and they get loans from where? From banks, right? And how does government gets money to invest on capital formation? Obviously, it also borrows money. It borrows money from the open market. About this, you will study in future videos. But here, just understand that government also borrows money. And where does the government borrow money from? Open market. Open market, let's just say banks only. Now, both firms and government depend on banks for money. And tell me, where do these banks get their money from? They get money from two sources. One, they get money from public deposits. And second, they get money from RBI in the form of loans. But out of these two, it is public deposits which forms the major chunk of money that banks depend on. People keep money in the form of savings bank deposit, fixed deposit and other such deposits. That is what makes major chunk in banks, right? So now you are understanding the importance of savings. Savings are indirectly related to capital formation. Without savings, both firms and government will not be able to borrow money from banks, because if people stop saving, then government and firms will stop investing money for capital formation, right? And you know, capital formation is essential to increase the production capacity of economy. Without bridges, roads, highways, ports, you cannot improve your economy. You cannot increase the GDP of economy, right? So savings is directly linked with increase in the productive capacity of economy or increase in GDP. So as savings increases, GDP increases. As savings decrease, GDP may also decrease because there is decrease in investment expenditure. But we have already discussed just now that aggregate demand is essential for economy. You might ask this question, sir, on the one hand you are saying aggregate demand is essential for economy. Without aggregate demand, GDP will not increase and GDP may stagnate or may go into depression. And on the other hand, you are saying savings is extremely essential for increasing GDP. Now, if people save, do they have money to spend and increase the demand? No. For increasing the demand, you need to consume. So without consumption, demand may not increase, and consumption depends on expenditure. You need to spend money. But we are saying savings is also important. So here lies the important balance. In economy, there must be balance between demand and savings. That is, expenditure must also be there. In order for economy to keep running, you also need savings for increasing the productive capacity of economy, right? What happens if we focus only on savings? Then it leads to one important concept which was given by Maynard Keynes, is paradox of thrift. What is paradox of thrift? Keynes said that if all the people started saving, right, we might think it is good for economy because we get more money for investment expenditure. Capital formation will take place, right? But he is saying that it will impact the demand, right? And if demand decreases because of excessive saving, then as we saw in our previous slide, eventually it leads to depression, recession and complete collapse of economy. So excessive focus on saving will impact demand and leads to these all problems. So Keynes said that thrifty, that is excessive saving, may be good in the short term, but it is extremely dangerous for overall economy in the long term. Hence, that is called paradox of thrift. Why it is called a paradox? Because though savings is good, but excessive saving is a paradox, which is not good. So this is the importance of savings. So I hope you have understood these two important functions performed by households. Consumption, which is important for increasing aggregate demand. Savings, which is important for capital formation. Now we will see the impact of second factor in circular flow of economy. Corporates or firms. What are the two important functions performed by corporates or firms? One important function is production of goods and services. It is the firms which undertake production of goods and services. Without production of goods and services, there is no economy, right? Which is the second important function? We already discussed while discussing savings. Exactly. Investment expenditure. And this investment expenditure is important for capital formation. So these are the two important functions undertaken by firms. Let us now understand the function performed by government. Government performs three important functions. One is it undertakes consumption expenditure. Government also runs an important administrative machinery, right? It has to, both central and state governments have employees, have offices, and government also needs to pay salaries to its employees. So all of this constitutes consumption expenditure of the government, and this consumption expenditure, as we have already seen, increases the money supply in economy. Second important function, as we have already discussed, is investment expenditure, right? Investment expenditure leads to capital formation, right? So third important function undertaken by Government is social transfers. What are social transfers or transfer payments? We have already seen, right? So these are the three important functions undertaken by government. Now, these three functions are extremely essential, because while studying inflation and deflation and recession, we will see that it is the government expenditure which will be extremely essential for reviving the economy. There you will understand the significance of consumption expenditure and investment expenditure by the government. Both of them helps in crowd-in effect. And what is it and what is its significance in reviving the economy? We will understand in detail while studying those concepts, and we will study those concepts with reference to what happened during COVID-19 times. One important thing which I forgot to mention is that both firms and government also undertake savings function, but those savings are very minuscule compared to savings undertaken by households. So maximum savings in economy is of households, not of corporations or firms and government. So the last important factor of our circular flow of income or our economy is exports and imports. So what are the functions undertaken by exports and imports? Exports increase the money supply in economy. Imports decrease money supply in economy. So these are the two important functions. Having understood all the four factors of aggregate demand, that is households, government, corporations or firms, and exports and imports, let us now understand what is the relationship between aggregate demand and GDP. How do you relate both of these? You can observe here that whatever there is a demand in economy, there is production, right? Because production is directly proportional to demand. Whatever there is demand in economy, that much will be production in economy. So what is production? We have already seen in circular flow of income that whatever the amount of goods and services produced by firms is called GDP by product method. That is, we will take all the goods and services produced by firms and we take final value of those goods and services, and whatever that value is actually GDP, right? So production gives us the exact value of GDP, right? So if this is same as this, then if production gives us the value of GDP, then obviously demand, that is total aggregate demand, will also give us the value of GDP. Instead of calculating the final value of goods and services, if we calculate the overall aggregate demand in economy, then also we will get an idea about the GDP. If both give value of GDP, then what is the difference? You will see that production will give us the idea of GDP from supply side, right? What is the supply of goods and services? And this will give us the idea of economy from demand side, how demand is functioning in economy. And by understanding demand side and supply side, government and RBI will be able to create policies which are better suited for the economy. So this is the relationship between aggregate demand and GDP, and this will be helpful when you read fiscal policy and monetary policy. So if we calculate GDP from this side, then we will add the final value of all the goods and services produced in economy. And if we calculate GDP from demand side, then we will add all the expenditure undertaken by four factors that we already discussed. And what are those four factors? One is consumption expenditure of households. Second is investment expenditure of firms. Third is government expenditure. Fourth is net exports. So this is the formula for that. Why we are taking net exports? Because we saw exports bring in money into money supply, but imports take money out of money supply, right? Hence, you have to find what is the total inflow of money into economy. For that, you have to minus imports from exports, and what you get is net exports, right? And this is the way of calculating GDP from demand side, and this is the formula. Now we have reached the very last section of our video. What type of economy is India, right? See, we have seen that there are four important factors in economy. These are households, firms, government, and foreign sector, right? Now economy's growth depends on all these four factors. So we will see which factor is the dominant factor which is driving India's GDP. Out of four factors, which factor is the most important factor? Whether Indian GDP is driven by household consumption expenditure or government expenditure or investment expenditure or exports. Let us see that with the help of the chart given in economic survey. Here you see share of sectors in nominal GDP. Four sectors that we discussed are given. Total consumption, that is government consumption, private consumption. So these are the two factors that we studied: government expenditure and household expenditure, that is private expenditure. Next is total investment expenditure. Both government and private firms undertake investment expenditure. This also we have studied. Next is net exports, right? So these are the four factors. Now you see here, total consumption is 69% of GDP, and out of that around 60% of total consumption is being driven by households. So most important component of our economy is consumption. So India is hence called a consumption based economy. So what is the contribution of consumption in the overall GDP of India? Around 70%. And we discussed that capital formation is extremely essential for driving the growth of Indian economy. And what is the contribution of capital formation, which is done by both government and firms? It is around 30% in 21-22. Right. And what is the contribution of net exports? You will see that it is in negative in 21-22. Why? Because this is the problem of Indian economy, because our imports are very much high than exports. Two important imports which are driving import bills in India are oil and gold. Okay, so this you will study while studying external sector of economy and balance of payment, etc. Net export does not have any impact on Indian economy because it is in negative. In fact, it is driving Indian economy down. Most important factor which is driving Indian economy is consumption. Hence, it is called consumption-based economy. Some economies are export-based economies. Examples of export-based economies: Japan and Germany, and South Korea also to some extent. India must move from being a consumption-based economy to export-based economy. That will also fulfill the dream of self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. And for India to become one of the export-based economies, India must increase its gross fixed capital formation, because this is what will drive production of more goods and services in an efficient manner, which will be helpful in increase the total exports in the share of our GDP. I hope you have understood what is the meaning of consumption-based economy and exports-based economy, how India is trying to move from consumption-based to exports-based economy. So this concludes our today's section. We have discussed some very important concepts today. If you have not understood any section from this video, then please revise that section and understand it again. Even after that, if you are facing difficulty in understanding, then please post your doubts in comment section. I will try to answer them as early as possible. Another most important thing, please subscribe, like and share this video and spread it as far as possible so that everyone can benefit out of it. Our next video will be on GDP and different types of GDPs and how do we calculate GDP. We will see that in detail. Before that video, I will be releasing one more video which will be on questions based on the 3 videos that we have done till now. So we will see some important questions and we will refine our understanding of these concepts through those questions. So until next time, study well, take care, bye bye.